Welcome back to the Holistic Homes Podcast. My name's Christine. I'm a licensed GC and healthy home consultant, and I'm here to walk you through the biggest question that I get asked all the time. And that is, what does it cost to actually build a healthy home? Or how much more is a healthy home going to cost me? So in today's episode, I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to give you some practical numbers, but also keep in mind, it's going to be pretty dependent on what region you're building in. But I want to give you some practical things to consider in your new build or renovation, because the truth is, building a healthy home is not at all similar to building just a standard building code compliant home. So let's get into it. So the first question really is going to need to start with a conversation with your builder. So instead of determining, can I even build a healthy home? Should I just forget this idea? I want you to actually do some really thorough due diligence and weigh all the options here. And the best place to start is actually talking with builders. So get a really good baseline before we can even have a conversation with our clients on how we're going to make things more robust, or things that we're going to incorporate into the build to include additional waterproofing layers in their basement. Before we can even start with those conversations, we have to first have a baseline. And that baseline is going to come through having conversations with local builders. So I would start almost like an interview process with potential builders. You might have friends or neighbors or family members that are giving you referrals to builders. Well, we got to make sure that that builder understands what your expectations are for the build. So you should be interviewing builders, which might seem a little bit foreign to some builders, but you are hiring someone for a service, and you should be interviewing them, and they should treat it almost like a job interview. When you're hiring a builder, that is like a short-term marriage. And building a home for you and your family is a very intimate thing to be doing. So this should not just be a straight referral. You like the way that your neighbor's house turned out, so you're going to hire the same builder. That's not going to lead to building a healthy home. You likely have different expectations, and in building a healthy home, we want to know what's going on behind the walls, not just all the pretty tile. So start with interviewing several builders and talk through things that you might be expecting. You don't have to know construction lingo to have conversations with builders around your expectations. So start with things like, how do you treat lumber? How do you handle water damage if it rains during my build process? Start to get a feel for if these builders might be a good fit, just in aligning with what your goals are. And then next, if you think, hey, this builder could potentially be a good fit, then you want to start talking about budget. You got to understand the square footage and Pinterest board vision that you have. Is that even feasible to build? So those very, very early on conversations with your builder are typically going to be based around a cost per square foot. These are just numbers thrown out there. It's impossible for a builder that you've had one or two conversations with, it's impossible for them to give you a cost to build your home. There's so many variables. They don't know what finishes you want, appliances. They don't know if you want Venetian plaster everywhere. There's just too many variables for a builder to give you a cost, but what they can give you is a cost per square foot. And even when you get that number, it's going to be a range. I would say it's going to depend so much on region, but if I were to give you a number, I would say it's pretty common to hear ranges that are going to vary between $100 to $200 a square foot. I'm not talking about building $100 to $200 a square foot. I'm talking about builders are likely going to give you $300 to $500 a square foot. You're going to get a range. That's going to feel really frustrating for you. How on earth do you budget for a build when you get these big ranges? But you have to start there. You have to know if your 3,000 square foot vision is going to match up with that cost per square foot range. So have discussions with multiple builders, even just a vetting process. Are they even aware of, water damage and mold being a potential issue, or are they gaslighting you in those even initial interviews or questions? So start there, then proceed to the next step on let's have a conversation around cost per square foot. What does it look like? Is it 300 a square foot? Is it 600 a square foot? Get a ballpark range that you can start to work with so you know what you're even potentially looking at square footage wise. Then from there, once you have that baseline, you need to be asking, what does that include? I so often see these ballpark figures driven by finishes. And that's completely the opposite of what we're focused on as a healthy home consultant. We're driven on performance and how this home's going to maintain being healthy. But these ranges that you get are often driven by tile and appliances and light fixtures and all the interior finishes. But what you can be asking once you have that per square foot conversation, what you can be asking is, what does that include? What does that include from like an exterior standpoint? And ask, what type of exterior does that include? Are you getting a building code compliant house wrap? Or does that include more robust exterior layers? Does that include any rigid insulation on the exterior? Does that include a rain screen on the exterior? You have to know what you're working with first. So get a per square foot estimate, a range, and then try to nail down a bit more. What does that include on the exterior? You can say, I'm not interested in talking about finishes at this point. I'm wanting to build a healthy home, so I want to know what are the exterior layers to keep it watertight and performing really well. And then you'll get some feedback from how that builder typically builds their home. They might say, we build all of our homes using zip board as the exterior sheathing, or we build all of our homes using Tyvek house wrap. We always seal and condition our attics. Or, you're going to start to have these conversations to gauge where this builder is at in building a higher performing home. So then once you get this range, you'll know what areas you might want to be beefing up. So if, they have no feedback on their attic or the ways that they beef up their foundation, that might give you some intel in that you're going to need to budget to beef those items up. So what areas of their typical building process are just standard ways of building, and what areas of their build process are actually already incorporating higher performing materials. And then you can take it from there. Then when it comes to how much more is this going to cost you from that's just standard per square foot cost, that's going to be a little bit more challenging. So that's going to be a conversation between you and your architect, because your architect is responsible for getting those details into your plans. But to give you an idea of how much more some of these higher performing items can cost, I would say the most common area that I see build cost increasing in new builds is going to be around the attic and how the roof and attic are assembled. A very standard way of building an attic is going to be a ventilated attic, meaning you have outdoor air moving through the attic passively to keep it, cool, or to make sure that there's not issues within attic rain or issues within air leakage in the attic. But it's still a ventilated attic. That is a very common way of building. To beef it up and make a high performance attic that's going to actually have air control layers, that's when you go to a fully sealed and conditioned attic. That is very different, and that is one of the biggest cost increases I see in going from a standard build to a high performance build. So having a fully sealed attic requires completely different insulation strategies and air sealing strategies. And what I see in going from a traditional attic to a sealed attic, that typically increases that line item 30 to even 40%. The reason that it has such a big cost increase is because you're often building almost two roofs. So there's a whole lot more material and a whole lot more labor involved in doing that. And it's going to require someone very skilled in doing that type of installation. So that's one area that I think needs to be addressed early on, to see if it's even within your budget to do something like that, because sealing your attic makes a tremendous difference in the performance of your home. So 30 to 40% is what we see when going from ventilated to a sealed and conditioned attic. And again, this is all going to be specific to your region. So talk with your builder about what those numbers actually could be interpreted in. The next big area that we see build cost increase has to do with the exterior enclosure. These are your exterior walls. A very standard code compliant way for most builds is just having a house wrap. You've probably seen homes being built in your area today that have Tyvek house wrap on them. But is that what you're expecting for a robust way of building? Because again, these areas they're going to be built one time. You're going to have your roof framed one time. You're going to have your exterior walls in your basement built one time. So that's something else that we see bigger cost increases in. If you're planning to do exterior rigid insulation and have an actual rain screen and exterior siding material that's not vinyl or that's not just a standard stucco, that's another area that could potentially increase 20-30% depending on what is included in those standard baseline costs. So consider if you're wanting to beef up those areas. And then another area, again, sticking with the exterior enclosure, is going to be your basement. A standard code compliant way of building a basement most of the time is going to require just one layer of waterproofing. That may not be a robust way to have a watertight basement. Most of the waterproofing of basements, it's gonna degrade over time. That's why we see so many water intrusion issues in basements that were built 40, 50, 60 years ago. It's only going to last a certain amount of time. All building materials have a useful life, and they get to the end of their useful life. So what do you do in those instances where you have a 1960s home that has a basement and the damp proofing, is starting to break down, or they're settling in that foundation that's leading to cracks? So you want to be building the exterior of your home, especially basement, subterranean areas that are going to have longevity, that are going to far exceed just one layer of waterproofing or one line of defense against water intrusion. So that's another area that should really consider beefing up, that's going to have longevity and keep things watertight in your basement especially. So there's no just percentage. I know that many people wish that there could just be a line drawn in the sand and that traditional way of building is X amount per square foot, but going to a high performance watertight build is gonna increase costs 10% or 20%. There's no one size fits all. because we don't know what your builder is starting as a baseline, and we also don't know what areas of your build are important to you to beef up. But I would say the biggest areas that you should consider like putting more funds to and increasing the budget are going to be hands down the exterior. These are your one and done items. It is far more challenging to re-excavate and add additional layers to your basement for robust waterproofing and exterior insulation. That's far more challenging than swapping out interior fixtures or lighting fixtures down the road. So I always encourage to really put a majority of your budget to a really solid exterior, and also consider what areas on the interior can you maybe downgrade if your budget needs to. What areas of your interior can you swap out in 5 or 10 years? Maybe it's this big, beautiful chandelier you were planning on. That's going to be far easier to get a handyman in there and swap out a nicer chandelier in 5 or 10 years than having to re-waterproof your basement. So I would encourage you to start talking with builders, see if they're even on the same page with you or if they're gaslighting you right out of the gate, and then move into how to get some sort of ballpark cost per square foot of what this build is going to cost based off of the square footage you're envisioning. Get a range, and then move to the next step of understanding what does that include, what does that not include, what do you get, what do you not get, what does your builder use as their standard building enclosure practices. Get a good idea there, and then start to do the research on what areas you want to beef up. This is an area we really guide our clients in making more robust decisions. We like to approach these conversations as like good, better, best topics, but there needs to be a strategy on what areas of the home need to be beefed up. And then the last part of this is do some homework on what areas you can compromise on the interior. What can you save on the interior so that you can give those funds to the exterior? Because you do not want to have issues on the exterior that's going to be far more costly to swap out, upgrade, remediate, far more costly than making some simple changes on the interior finishes or fixtures, bathrooms. Those are far simpler to upgrade down the road. So that's my feedback for you on how much more it can cost to build a healthier home. I know there's no set percentage, which would feel really great to have, but it's some homework for you to really evaluate what's feasible within your build cost. What does it look like as a baseline? What does it look like building things more robust? And what's actually feasible. We've had clients multiple times that really wanted to have things extremely dialed in, and so they compromised a little bit on square footage. Things got a little bit smaller, but they got the build that they wanted. And I think just not enough homeowners are made aware of what they are actually getting in their home construction to make those decisions. There's no wrong decision. It's that you as a homeowner paying all of this and paying the bill for this build, you should be able to make informed decisions on what you want and what you're getting and what's not included. And if you need to shrink square footage to get what you want, I think that you should be able to have that information far enough in advance to make that decision. So I hope this was helpful for you and that you were able to catch this episode before you were far enough along in your designing and planning process of your project. We would love to see if it's something that we can help you with, and you can always reach out to us on social media on Instagram, Holistic Homes by Christine, or check out another one of our episodes. Our goal is to really make this an informative podcast so that you can make informed decisions in your healthy home project. So I will see you on the next episode.